Coogs House. All right, so it's official. Jamal Shead is coming back. Does that set the Houston Cougars up to have the best backcourt in the Big 12 and maybe the entire NCAA?
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast all about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, here to break down all things Cougs. If you're a U of H fan or just a hater can't step by, please be sure to subscribe down below. That way we get the latest on the Cougs into your newsfeed each and every day. We appreciate you making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day as an everyday listener. Welcome back to the YouTube channel. It is good to see you again. I remember we're doing one of those giveaways at every 250 subscribers. The next one is 1,250. I'm giving away a hat, just like I've got on here, the Cougar Paw, locked on here on the side. It's a nice Nike Dry Fit hat. Again, that's at 1,250, and we are almost there, so make sure you subscribe down below to make sure we get there. Then like and comment on the video to let us know if you are entering the contest. If, after talking a lot about Houston Cougar basketball today, you are just all basketballed out for the off season, tell us in the comments down below if you think goldfish are animal crackers. All right, so today's episode is all based on the premise that on Wednesday, Jamal Shead said that he is officially returning to Houston after dabbling in the NBA draft process, and LJ Cryer did the same, the transfer from Baylor, that is, on Tuesday. And so the Houston Cougars know their roster, it looks like. We'll be looking at the starting group, the bench group, and the new guys coming in the roster very, very quickly across today's episode. There is room to change this roster. We'll talk about some at the end in the third segment. But the first segment, we'll look at the starters, what the new starting lineup looks like, and what their strengths and weaknesses are. Second, rotation. Last, new guys, and if there's any new guys. So let's jump on in. The starting lineup as now. The projected starting five would be Jamal Shead at the point guard, LJ Cryer at the other guard. I don't want to quite say shooting guard because it also carries some of those responsibilities. Damian Dunn at that wing spot, Juwan Roberts at the power forward, and Javier Francis at the center position. Jamal Shead, 6'1", 190, 10.5 points per game, 5.4 assists per game, was the defensive player of the year in the American Athletic Conference last season. He does return from dabbling his feet in the NBA draft process. Two-time All-American Athletic Conference player, All-American Athletic Conference team. And for what it's worth, if Houston has a great run next year, may go down as a historic all-time great college point guard. He's my favorite for a lot of reasons on the team. One is he plays in your jersey type defense, and two, his best offense is just what I call HB dive, just diving at the rim. That's the point guard. The shooting guard, or the shooting guard spot, or combo guard, will be LJ Cryer, who's also listed at 6'1", 190. The Baylor transfer had 15 points, 2 assists, and 2 rebounds per game last season. Was third team All Big 12 last season and shot 41.5% from behind the three-point arc. For what it's worth, that is 3 percentage points higher than Marcus Sasser did at Houston in the same position. So again, that's big time buckets out of that position. He also tested the NBA waters, got some notes, and came back, but this time transferred to Houston. So he comes to Houston. Damian Dunn is another transfer. The 6'5", 165-pound Temple transfer had 15.3 points per game, 3 assists, and 3.5 rebounds per game last season. Two-time All-American Athletic Conference team as well. Shot 34.8, about 35% from 3. Juwan Roberts, a little more familiar, 6'7", 220, 10 points per game, 7.5 rebounds, and 1.5 blocks per game last season. He'll be switching likely, based on the room, from the center position in a smaller lineup to the power forward position in what hopes to be a little bit bigger lineup. Was an All-American Athletic Conference player last year. And then Javier Francis is 6'9", 225 with a 7'4" wingspan, just 4.3 points, 3.5 rebounds, and 1.1 blocks in 10.3 minutes per game last season. If you extrapolate those out to if he played a 40-minute basketball game, he played all 40 minutes, that would be 16.6 points, 12.7 rebounds, 4.6 blocks. The issue there would be that also be 6.2 fouls. So obviously, working on that, maturity in that aspect may be a big part of his game, but a high efficient as far as stuffing a stat sheet player for the Cougs last season. Have to feel like Javier Francis, and we'll start with him as far as more detailed analysis goes. Maturing with Kelvin Sampson in the offseason is going to be so huge for him. I mean, we've seen what Kelvin does with the big men. Frankly, just what he's done with Juwan Roberts. Of course, Juwan Roberts' career, or Josh Carlton, Tajay Moore had in the post touches. Even in a short limited role, what he did with Jarris Walker last season and the floaters and stuff. I mean, really could see a lot of growth out of Javier this winter, I should say. I guess we'll see it as early as the fall, right? Javier is clearly the least experienced guy, but also with that high motor he plays with, stuffing the stat sheet, like I mentioned, in such short bursts is a really hard thing to do, both mentally and physically. Like that's not just it's not a video game, right? You got to like check yourself in the game and then be ready to roll. But that motor and that length, the 7'4" wingspan, makes up for whatever he's missing in height there at 6'9" and change. I think he's got the chance to be a really impact player, the same way you saw like Norshad Omier help Miami get to the Final Four. They went through Houston to do that, right? The same way we saw Juwan Roberts make up for his lack of height in a couple different situations last year too. Those things seem really big. As I look at this, the key strengths of that starting five lineup with both Cryer and Shead coming back is first and foremost scoring. They've got a couple of legitimate shooters in Cryer and Dunn at the 3-point line. Cryer potentially being the best in the nation next season. Multiple scoring guys from multiple levels. Jamal Shead finished at the rim and the mid-range. He also showed decent catch-and-shoot numbers last year. Obviously, LJ Cryer has a 3-point shot, but he loves getting that mid-range floater as well. Damian Dunn was a 3-level scorer at Temple, one of their best scorers. We can go back and watch the previous list of this show when we were talking about Temple last season. Very talented. Great passing, great entry pass in the post, both from Shead and Cryer, as well as Juwan Roberts in the high-low. We loved last season watching Juwan Roberts getting the high-low action going with Jarris Walker kind of back-cutting on the low post. Now you got a more traditional low post guy down there with the same high-low kind of actions. Scoring's going to be great. Simply put, if you look at the points per game added up, and it doesn't add up perfectly to this next season, but their starting lineup alone, if my quick math serves me well, is going to be looking at close to 60 points per game. They were only in the mid-60s last season as a whole team, and their starting lineup, looks like if you extrapolate Javier Francis out to a little bit bigger role, you're looking at guys scoring around 60 points per game without pulling anybody off the bench to score and shoot and those kinds of things. Really talented scoring lineup with a bunch of different options, and that makes it hard on the opponent's defense. The weakness of this lineup, and we have to mention it, is their size. And by size, I mean height. I mean, they've got some long wingspans, long arms with Dunn, Cryer, Francis, etc., even Juwan Roberts in his own right. But there's no one over 6'9". You have two guards, 6'1" and under, right? That means you're going to need to rotate, keep fresh legs, and keep the defensive intensity up in other ways. And on the glass, you're going to have to play with high energy and high enthusiasm. Those big tournaments at the end of the season where you play 2 games in 3 days, that second game, the motor is going to be key. You're going to just have to stay in great shape over the course of the whole season. I would love to see them, negate that with a bunch of different coverages, kind of get out and some more trapping kind of stuff, and so where you force turnovers, so you don't even have to worry about rebounding because the turnovers lead to obviously not getting shots off. I could see a bunch of that kind of stuff happening with both Dunn and Shead. One of the reasons Cryer came to Houston is to kind of continue to develop as a defender. And so, honestly, he has some room to grow in that area as far as becoming a Houston Cougar. I think he's athletically very capable, and so I don't see any reason why he couldn't. But that's a fair concern and critique of this, is that LJ Cryer was the 3rd best guard defender at Baylor last season. Now, the first 2 are pros. So, that is a relative thing, right? Obviously, that changes things up a little bit. But I have to say that if they can kind of negate some of those size issues and coverages and schematics, this is an incredible starting lineup, and one that I think we'll be talking about as one of the best and most athletic in the Big 12, and one of the highest scoring in all of college basketball by the time it's all said and done, once you have Damian Dunn and LJ Cryer and Jamal Shead out there as your guard spots. I want to start talking to some about the bench guys and what kind of, aspect of the game they can change and what kind of changes they can bring in. They come in off the bench. But first, I got to talk a little bit about our buddies at FanDuel because it is time for the NBA Finals. That means it's time to make a fast break to FanDuel because right now, new customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's a new number, folks. $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Now, I look at this game. I would pick the Nuggets to win, but I don't know that they cover a 9-point spread currently, so I might actually take the Heat to keep it under 9 there. I think some of these props really fun against the NBA Finals. Jimmy Butler in Game 1 is at plus 2,100 to get a triple-double. Now, I understand he's not typically Mr. Triple-Double in the same way Nikola Jokic across from him will be, but I have to say that I do think, honestly, if they want to win a game, they might need it. So I'm saying put some money down there on plus 2,100 for Jimmy Butler to get a triple-double because he's going to be stuffing the stat sheet. And I'm telling you to do it at FanDuel.com. There's no better place to bet on all the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's FanDuel.com/locked-on. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, so I did mention that I want to talk some about the bench guys because if they play defense in the way I assume they're going to have to play defense next season, the Houston Cougars are going to get tired. And I don't mean to say that like their conditioning program is not great because Coach Bishop is as good as they are in the country, right? And Sampson is as disciplined a coach as there is in the country. That's not the problem. The problem is it's going to be such a taxing level of defense to play that those starters are going to get worn out. So who are the bench guys coming in? Who are the bench guys that we know coming in? Who are those returning guys that can come in and play a role? First and foremost, got my eyes set on Terrence Arceneaux. We mentioned that 2 guards in the Houston backcourt are 6'1", right? Arceneaux is 6'5", 195 pounds. Now, he played a limited 13.9 minutes per game last season. Had 3.7 points per game, 2.5 rebounds per game, just a half an assist per game. And so you're wondering, like, what's the big deal here? What's going on? But his per 40 numbers obviously grow a little bit to 10.5 points, 7 rebounds. He gets, at that point, be 1.5 assists and 1.5 steals or something like that, right? Almost 2 steals. But Arceneaux has the kind of potential that had people thinking he might test the NBA draft waters this spring and summer because he's got that kind of length, size, fluidity. He's hyper competitive. There's some natural instincts there as well as far as scoring goes. And we saw it as early as Oregon. And we really saw it when he tapped into it a little bit more over the course of the tournaments, both the conference tournament and NCAA tournament in March, right? Like he's got those natural things in him. And when he stepped in for a hurt Marcus Sasser, you really saw parts of it show up in spots, right? And it makes sense. This is the 3rd highest ranked recruit in modern U of H history, right? For what it's worth, Daniel House and Jarris Walker are 2-1 in the modern era, right? Arceneaux is a extremely talented kid, and with the right kind of season, and especially if he could nudge his way into the starting lineup for like Damian Dunn or whatever, you could see this guy being a lottery pick next season. There were some people projecting just on talent, on like natural talent and potential alone, he'd be a 2nd-round pick as is right now entering the draft, right? And this guy that barely got to play for Houston last season. I'm really, really high on this kid. Obviously, it's nice to have a kid from Beaumont coming in and being so impactful. But I really think that he's going to have a giant jump. He played a lot more forward in high school, and he's got put into more of a guard, ball handling type position at Houston. Now, Beaumont United, they won a bunch of state titles. Like they played very well, and I don't mean to say he did the wrong thing there by any stretch, but that did look like it slowed him down on his guard growth. And now at Houston, with a full year in the system and a full year with Sampson, and Sampson and Quanis and all the guys, right, Hollis as well, you'll see, I think, a lot of growth out of him. And frankly, the same shooter we saw in the Oregon game, or the same competitor we saw getting in jerseys and playing defense in the latter part of the season. I'm thinking like the second half of the ECU game, or I'm thinking, frankly, even the Memphis title game, as abysmal as that game was for stretches, like Terrence Arsenal, I thought played pretty well for parts of it. The Auburn game, right? Like when things were a little dicey in the opening game against Norfolk State, right? Like this is a guy that can play very good basketball, and I think he's going to have a big, big leap this season. Similarly, his backcourt rising sophomore teammate, Emmanuel Sharp, is kind of the same boat. Sharp is 6'3", 200 pounds, and had 5.9 points per game, 2.2 rebounds, just half an assist, played about 15 minutes last year. But per 40 minutes, I stretched it out to 15 points and about 6 rebounds, and those kinds of things. I think the biggest thing for Sharp's development is he finally has a full, healthy offseason to just focus on getting better, right? Between his, I guess he technically transferred to Houston in the middle of his senior season of high school. And so between his like redshirt season or his senior year of high school season, whichever one you want to call it, and his true freshman season, remember, he had a catastrophic lower leg break in December of his senior high school that kind of like leapt him into U of H campus, so we can go ahead and get in rehab programs and so on. He spent a lot of that offseason just getting healthy and then just getting in shape and then just trying to get ready to play. And we saw him grow and get in better shape over the course of the season. Down the stretch, he actually lost some minutes to Arsenault in a crowded backcourt room. But I wouldn't stress too much about that and looking at their projections next season. They do very different things. Sharp is a no pun intended sharp shooter. He comes in and he knocks down threes at a high clip. He's going to take a couple heat check ones as well. So his percentages, I think, look more mundane than he is. We both remember when he got hot, hot, right? And so you could see him fill in that kind of role as well, especially if Houston's going to have offenses that rely on outside shooting, because that's what the starting lineup has. You could see Emmanuel Sharp come in when LJ Cryer gets in foul trouble, when Jamal Shead gets in foul trouble, he's covering the other team's best guard or whatever, right? Like he can come in and fill some of those same roles. I think that there's a natural fit for him there as well. The big question mark is Ramon Walker. Now, Ramon Walker did say about 2 months ago at this point that he's coming back. There are questions about that or whether or not he would transfer. He took a mysterious medical red shirt in the middle of the season last season. And I hope, frankly, Ramon, if you're this at all gets back to, hope you're doing okay. I know whatever I was going through must have been a lot. But he saw very little time on the floor last season, but was very much the energy, dive on the floor. I mean, obviously, we think about the Wichita State game, dives on the floor, grabs 3 rebounds, saves the game the season before, right? At 6'4", 210, can he be that swing forward that plays a lot bigger than himself at 6'4" and be like a small ball 4 even, and like a crazy small lineup, or even just be a more like at 6'4", can he cover the 6'7" small forward in the other team? Offensively, he's still, as of last season, was fairly limited. But defensively, he's a guy that like has to be on the floor, I think, in this unit, especially. And again, I love the LJ Cryer ad in the transfer portal, but Cryer's defense is not what Marcus Sasser's was. And so unless he grows into it, which would be great for the Cougs, Ramon Walker may need some time on the floor just to make up for that defensive intensity, because that was the kind of thing that screwed him last year. Was Sasser was also one of Houston's best defenders. And so there was no real time for Walker, whereas there might be some more of that this season as a great defender. I still, if I'm looking at biggest growth in the second group of the second unit, the returners, I'm still looking at Terrence Arsenault as having the highest upside this season. Really has all the tools to be a pro guard. I know that people are going to look at me like, what? But like the same way Jarris Walker had the potential, and this will be a top 5, 6, 7 draft pick at worst, right? This NBA draft. Terrence Arsenault has the same kind of like potential in him, in the sense that like things just seem to like the things that are hard to teach come to Terrence really, really well. Emmanuel Sharp was his coach's son, and so he's got some of the same kind of stuff too. And I think Ramon Walker's role will be much more needed this season. So I'm excited about these 3 guards. I will say though that that's 3 guards, right? We haven't talked about a substitute big man yet. And so I guess with that, we need to spend our third segment talking some about the freshmen coming in. So let's talk a little bit about them as well. I guess we should mention their names first. Cordelius or Cordell Jefferson, 6'3", 180-pound guard from Arlington Martin High School. I love him. We'll get to more in that second. JoJo Tugler, a 6'7", I'll just say forward because he can play either forward to me, from Cy Falls, with a 7'6" wingspan. That is an accurate 6'7" guy with 7'6" wingspan. Said Loth, he is 6'9" and change. I've seen him listed at 6'10" as well, but 265 and not an ounce of extra body fat on him. 7'2" wingspans I'm seeing there. Jacob McFarland is from Rancho Verde in Moreno, California. 6'10" and change, 205. I'm seeing in both 7'2" and 7'3" wingspans on him. So that's where. Oh, I didn't mention Ryan Elvin in the last segment when I was talking about returners at guards. Ryan Elvin, I guess, is going to be the same kind of impact next season as he's had. Now, I will say that if you ask any of the guys on the staff, Ryan Elvin's impact on this team is incredible stuff in the locker room. Truly inspirational kid. And so I probably shouldn't move so quickly past that. But I will say that I'm looking like on the floor impact. He's the guy we cheer for at the end of the games. But his locker room stuff, I think, is where he makes his impact in a bigger way. Sorry, Ryan. I hope you don't take that the wrong way. Big guys coming in as freshmen. So starting with Tugler and Loth. Big said is a giant. He also transferred to Houston and then, quote, redshirt the second half of the year at Christmas last year. Not unlike how Emmanuel Sharp did the year before. It looks like he's only been playing basketball about 4 years. I saw an interview from him. At this point, it's been like 8 months ago, where he said he'd just been playing basketball a little bit over 3 years at that point. So transited property. He's been playing about 4 years. That means he started playing basketball for the first time at around 15, serious basketball, at around 15 in the Ivory Coast. Crazy high ceiling. When you watch his high school stuff, like a really hard roller. Think like screen and dive. And he is so big, so strong, so quick, so athletic, so explosive that in itself punctures the defense in a way that really takes away a lot of things and will help the skip pass, help the bounce pass, may even take away like the guys covering the ball handler on the screen roll actions because the way he takes them down the rim with them. Tugler probably has the more skill of the two. The 6'7", the 7'6" wingspan to me means that he can make up for a lot of that 6'7" height as a forward spot. That ratio is just nuts. I love Tugler because he wants to dunk or block everything. You watch these clips of this kid from Cy Falls. I mean, he is trying to dunk every single basketball he can, and every shot within a long arm's reach for him, he is trying to block as well. That ran the break really well as a high school senior. And, you know, I understand his high school competition, but he also, I thought, played perimeter defense fairly well. The length helps a lot there, obviously, but I thought he played perimeter defense pretty well. And I'm not alone in thinking this. I think Tugler's got a crazy high ceiling. Team USA just signed into their group of 35 for the U19 team. Now, that does not necessarily mean he's made the roster for the travel squad to FIBAs and stuff like that, but it does mean that he's one of the 35 best players under 19 in the country. And they're taking him with them as far as training camps and stuff like that goes. So extra work with pro coaches and those kinds of things are really good for him. I imagine one of those two guys, Tugler or Loth, will get a lot of minutes, right? A lot of minutes. Just because they're kind of the next guy in line as far as the centers go. You could theoretically go super small and move Jawan from the 4 to the 5 if Javier got in foul trouble, or put in a small ball power forward Terrence Arsenault or Ramon Walker, something like that, if Jawan Roberts got in foul trouble. But truthfully, one of these freshmen is probably going to play a lot. The one that I'd be surprised if he played a lot, not because he's not skilled enough, though, is Jacob McFarland. Again, 6'10", 205. He's really thin. But over the course of his high school career, he probably had the steepest stock rise of his recruitment. Great help side and zone defender. Again, really good instincts and timing on when to help from the backside of the rim on that. And admittedly, last season, Houston ran zone and outsmarted me at times. And then after having run very little zone throughout the year, wondering why they're running it at all. They ran against Auburn and kind of won the game on it. The deal with McFarland is not that he's not skilled enough to play right away. He probably has the best ball skills of anyone in this freshman group as far as the big men go, but he's so thin. I think he needs to spend a year redshirting with Alan Bishop, the strength and conditioning coach. Alan Bishop is world-renowned for this kind of stuff, and frankly, if McFarland wants to get the most out of his time in Houston, not spending a year of eligibility this year and just putting on good weight with Coach Bishop might be what's best for him. I know that obviously it's what's best for the team is what really matters and those kinds of things, but I can see that being important. So again, I think one of either Tugler or Loth will play. I don't know if McFarland will play a lot. The other will play some. I don't know if McFarland will see the floor this year or not, outside of much more of a redshirted kind of role. Those are all the big men. Last but not least, I will say he's not a freshman big man. I know that we got a lot of guards. You're going to love Cordell Jefferson. 6'3", 180, 4-star kid on a lot of sites. He's just so dang competitive. And it's just like, if we're playing badminton, if we're playing tug of war, if we're playing anything, I need dudes on my team that are competitive. And Cordell Jefferson is that. And what I love about it, he's not just that hyper-competitive guy from the DFW Metroplex that kind of took that Arlington Martin team on his back in a lot of ways, too. You watch that team out there playing basketball on his high school tape, and there is one Division I dude in the white or black jersey, whichever one they're wearing, and it is him, right? But ever since committing, his social media presence, his interviews with different recruit outlets, et cetera, it's all been all things UH. I mean, he's cheering on the girls team, the volleyball team, the baseball team. He's posting stuff about his future teammates. He's interacting with guys on Twitter. Like, he is all in on the Cougs. And having that level of competition and that level of all in with the caliber athlete that kid is, man, I'm telling you, that's going to be a special moment. If you got any other questions, comments, concerns about next year's basketball roster, now that Shead and Cryer are officially staying in the H, tell me down below, or tell me at Painsworth512, PAINSWORTH 512 on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all your favorite social media handles. I'll be happy to talk all things Cougs. Thank you all so much for tuning in today. If you want to look for something as a second listen, I'm going to recommend, if you're going to continue this basketball mood, to go check out Locked On College Basketball. I'm doing a great job breaking down the offseason. And now that window to declare if the NBA draft or not is over, they're going to be breaking down every single controversial decision as well. So make sure you go check out Andy and Isaac over there. Thank you all so much for tuning in to Locked On Cougs today. Locked On Cougs is a primary Locked On podcast network. That means your team every day. Go Cougs.